Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the November 29th, 2023 Parking and Traffic Safety Committee meeting to order. Leila, would you please call the roll?
Mary Lou McElwain. Steve Pesci.
Here.
Mark Syracusa.
Here.
Erica Wygonick.
Here.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney.
Here.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan.
Here.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Here.
Stephanie Casella, Planning Department.
Here.
Dave Allen.
Here.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Here. And if we could have the financial report?
Motion to accept the financial report?
Second.
Going to go on the screen or?
Sure.
All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then, what we're gonna do is a little different, is I'll look for a motion to move the presentations under item 5 up.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so first, we're gonna start with the presentation on the I-95, sorry. First, we're gonna start with the presentation on the I-95 sound wall and privacy fence project updates by the New Hampshire DOT.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the public official and public informational meeting for Portsmouth Project 43760. My name's Sam Newsom, and I'm the project manager for the New Hampshire DOT Bureau of Turnpikes. Also with me today is John Evans. He's our noise and air program manager for the DOT. We also have two people from our consulting firm helping us complete the project, Phil Kendall, and then also Dylan Gobey. Quickly going through our meeting agenda today, we'll be going through the project scope and purpose, location, design overview, noise analysis, and then construction schedule, and hopefully we've answered a lot of the questions by then, but we'll leave time for questions and answers at the end. So today, for the project scope, for the 43760 Portsmouth Soundwall project, kind of higher level overview, we'll be installing approximately 2,400 linear feet of sound wall near Panaway Manor along the I-95 southbound corridor. And then also, just north of there, also in the southbound lane, 3,400 linear feet in the Rockingham Ave, Edmond Avenue area along I-95. And then the last location will be on the northbound. This will be a privacy fence of approximately 1,000 linear feet, starting about 300 feet north of Woodbury Ave along the Franklin School area. So a project purpose for this, this got kicked off to install feasibility and reasonable noise abatement measures identified during the development of the part-time shoulder use project along I-95. And then also to provide a privacy fence adjacent to the new Franklin School. So I'm going to kick this off to Phil to give an overview of the project and go over some of the plan sheets as well.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. As Sam mentioned, my name is Phil Kendall, and I work with H&TB Corporation. We're the consultant firm helping New Hampshire DOT design the sound wall and privacy fence in Portsmouth. Here with me today is Dylan Gobey. He's going to be running the computer and the projection screens up here. Before I get into the project overview, I'd like to go over the walls, go over the graphics that are on the walls. Most of you were looking at them before the meeting tonight. What you have on those, what's being displayed in those is our proposed design. Underneath is aerial imagery. Please note that the aerial imagery closely matches the ground survey, but there are some slight differences. And then we have some in the hallway out there. There were also some profiles below those plan views, which I'll get into more detail when I get into the presentation. There just wasn't enough room to hang up the profiles in this room as well. As I mentioned, while I'm going through the project overview, Dylan's going to zoom into the plans so you can see them a little bit better from the seats that you're in. I know that it's small, those plans are small in the distance over there, and even looking at the screen from the room, across the room, it can be a little bit small. So don't worry, Dylan's gonna zoom in, you'll be able to see things in a lot better detail. The sound walls for this project are broken up into two areas, as Sam mentioned. There's the southern area down by Sherburne Road, and then there's the northern area up by Woodbury Ave. I'm going to start with the overview in the southern section, and this plan that's shown up on the screen right here is the same as the plans that are up on the wall. So if you think that there's any difference, there isn't. It's just a little bit brighter up here, and Dylan's going to zoom in for us. The southern section of the sound wall is broken up into two segments. The southern segment, oh, actually I should go over the legend. So to help understand what the colors are, we're going to zoom into the legend here. In the upper left-hand corner is a standard legend New Hampshire DOT has for all their public presentations. It's a standard colors, but for our presentations, really two colors that you really need to be paying attention to. There is the light green, which represents the existing tree line that's going to remain post-construction within the state's right-of-way, and then there's the lime green, a little bit brighter green, which is the area disturbance that will be used to construct the sound walls. All that will be done within the state's right-of-way. If you can zoom out, yep. Now, the southern section of the sound wall, the southern segment of the sound wall starts just north of the right-of-way line near the bus terminal station and extends 400 feet north to just Sherburne, up to Sherburne Road. In this plan, you'll see the two colors I just mentioned, the light green, which is the existing tree line that's going to stay post-construction, and then the lime green, which is the area disturbance, all within the state's right-of-way. That area disturbance will be used by the contractor to access the construction site and to also construct the sound walls. In the lower left, or I should say in the middle of this portion near Sherburne Road, you'll see a little bit darker image. That's representing a stone slope stabilization. That's being used to stabilize the slope because that's a little bit steeper slope than a standard 4-to-1 slope out there. And that's not typical for the project, but it is in some locations we had to utilize slope stabilization. In this area, the sound wall is approximately 60 to 65 feet off of the edge of pavement up on top of the hill. The second segment starts on the north side of Sherburne Road and extends approximately 2,000 feet to the north and runs behind Panaway Manor. In this area, the sound wall offset from the highway edge of pavement varies between 80 and 25 feet as we're going along. Again, you'll see the lime green color on the screen. That's the area disturbance that the contractor will use to access the site to construct a sound wall, but all within the state's right-of-way. At this point, we'll take a look at the two profiles for these two sound walls that I just mentioned. In the upper left-hand corner is another legend. This legend has 5 colors in it, very similar as the previous slide. The light green is the proposed slope work. The light brown is the existing ground. The dark gray is the proposed sound walls. The light red, pink is existing buildings, and the light gray is existing pavement. The two profiles shown here represent the sound walls in the southern area, the ones that I just talked about, spanning either side of Sherburne Road. The profile heights being presented here are based off of the noise study, and the heights are provide the necessary noise reduction based on that noise modeling study. There are also gradual steps in the sound panels, and that's to adjust the heights of the wall based on the needs developed by that noise model. The image, oh, where are we going? Oh, okay. So as Dylan zoomed here, there's an image above the profile here. This is taken down in Londonderry, New Hampshire. This is a sound wall that was just recently installed. This is the first installation of New Hampshire DOT's new concrete sound wall panel system. The dark gray on the profiles are showing the proposed panels that will have the same architectural finish as shown in this image. What I neglected to say, and it was probably because I slowed down and Dylan jumped ahead of me, the sound wall height in south of Sherburne Road, the height is average about 15 feet. In this area north of Sherburne Road, from Sherburne Road up to 2,000 feet to the north, the height varies from 10 feet up to 25 feet, depending on where it sits on that berm and comes down adjacent to I-95 southbound. Below, if you can zoom out, please. Below each profile are two representative sections along those walls. And they're showing you, they're intended to show the reference compared to southbound, I-95 southbound, the sound wall, and any adjacent buildings. The first representative section is along the southern sound wall, and in this image, you'll see I-95 southbound is represented by the car, image of the car on the far right-hand side, and the proposed ground in front of and behind the sound wall is shown in the lime green, and then behind the sound wall is the light red showing an existing building. Also in this image, you'll see that that is showing that stone slope protection that I mentioned earlier. Again, that's not typical for all the sections throughout the corridor, but only in areas where we had to steepen up the slope. The second representative section, again, this is along the northern sound wall, and it is showing where I-95 southbound is on the far right-hand side, again, by the image of the car, and then the light lime green showing the proposed slope and berm in front of and behind the sound wall, and then that a house in the light pink shown behind that sound wall. At this time, I'm going to continue with the northern sound wall, and this image, again, is very similar to the southern sound wall area, has the proposed layout and the aerial imagery in the background, same as the graphic that's hanging up on the wall. The difference of between the northern sound wall and the southern sound wall is the northern sound wall is broken up into 3 segments. The first segment starts just north of Route 4 and extends for, where's my note, 700 feet up to Woodbury Avenue. What you'll also notice, this is the area where the multi-use path comes from Woodbury Avenue and up and over. It should be noted that the intent is for this multi-use path to stay open during construction. However, there may be some short-time closures to allow the contractor to get their equipment in there or to do some small setup of equipment, but the intention is for the sound wall to stay, the multi-use path to stay open during construction. As we're panning to the north, the second segment is approximately 2,000 feet, and it runs between Woodbury Avenue and Maplewood Avenue. This segment has 2 bump outs in it that are needed to get around the existing overhead sign structure foundation and the new part-time shoulder use sign foundation. In all other locations, this sound wall is approximately 5 feet off of the edge of pavement. As I noted previously, again, in the same section, you'll see the 2 different colors, the light green representing trees that will stay in place post-construction, and the lime green is the area disturbance that the contractor will need to access and construct the new proposed sound walls. And the final segment, the third segment of this section, is about 340 feet long, and it runs from Maplewood Avenue and extends up to the Market Street on-ramp, which is the northern limits of the sound wall, and that's where the project will end. Again, that section is also 5 feet off the face of the sound wall, is approximately 5 feet off the edge of pavement. Also included as part of this project is a privacy fence. The privacy fence, Sam noted earlier, starts about 300 feet north of Woodbury Avenue and extends for 1,000 feet to the north. You'll notice there is a small 50-foot gap in that privacy fence, and that is to account for the existing overhead sign structure foundation. We did evaluate whether or not we could do a bump out similar to the sound walls that we showed just previously. We looked at it, however, the impacts associated with installing the bump out to get around that foundation required all the trees to be removed on that slope right down to the school. So it was felt that it was better to leave the trees and put a gap in the privacy fence. Okay, the profiles. Similar to the southern sound wall area, the northern sound wall area, we have some profiles up here. There's 3 different profiles, or 1 continuous profile, but 3 sections of profile for the 3 segments of the sound walls. And the area for the sound walls, these heights of that sound wall vary between 17 and 21 feet from the southern end by Route 4 up to Market Street on-ramp. So you'll see the profiles on here, the same colors, that same image that I showed you about the sound wall that was just constructed in Londonderry. Nice architectural finish on that concrete panels that will have the same finish here in Portsmouth. Below the profiles are 3 representative sections. The first one is along that southern segment by the multi-use path. The second representative section is actually around the privacy fence. And the third representative section is in that middle section of sound wall. So looking at that first representative section, similar to the southbound I-95, is on the right-hand side, shown by the picture of a car. The proposed slope in front of and behind the sound wall is shown in that lime green. And you'll see the multi-use trail there behind the sound wall. And then behind that, in that light red, is an existing building. As we pan over to the next one, the next representative section is again by the privacy fence. And we showed a vehicle on I-93 northbound. It's a picture of a pickup truck on the left-hand side. And then again with the lime green showing the proposed slope in front of and behind the privacy fence. And then the school in the light red in the far right-hand corner. And then the next representative section is that middle portion of sound wall. The I-93 northbound is shown on the right-hand side in picture of a car. Got caught on the truck there. I knew I was going to do it. And then we have the lime green showing the proposed slope in front of and behind the sound walls. And then in the far left-hand side, in the light red, is an existing building. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to John to talk about the noise modeling.
Thank you, Phil. Again, my name is John Evans. I'm the Air and Noise Program Manager for the Department of Transportation. I am also the Project Management Section Chief for the Environmental Section of the Department. Right before I get into the aspects of the noise investigation, I do want to mention a couple other things related to just general environmental review. This project is, as with any New Hampshire DOT project, is undergoing an environmental review as part of the what we call the NEPA process under the National Environmental Policy Act. That requires us to evaluate all potential environmental impacts associated with any project, including this one. And so we are evaluating endangered species and wetland impacts and all of those kinds of things as part of this environmental review. One of those pieces of that environmental review is Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which is essentially a law that requires evaluations of potential historic and cultural impacts related to construction projects such as this. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act allows people to become what are known as consulting parties to that historic analysis process. If there are any individuals who do wish to become part of that 106 process as a consulting party, please get in contact with me via email or as well as Sam Newsom through via email or call us or whatever, at the end of the presentation, our contact information will be up on the screen. If you feel that may be something that's of interest to you. Again, that's kind of an advisory role to the historic review process. It's not necessarily related to, say, if there's concerns related to noise specifically, it's more related to historic cultural resources. So with that, I think what everybody really kind of wants to know is, what are these noise barriers going to do? So as Phil kind of identified, up on the screen here, you'll see the two noise barriers and the privacy fence. The Panaway Manor noise barrier is down there to the left, and then to the right here, further up is the Rockingham Edmund Ave neighborhood noise barrier, and then the privacy fence on the other side, on the northbound side. The Panaway Manor noise barrier is, you can go ahead, so what this figure here is, this is actually a very similar, and in fact, it's the same figure that we showed several years ago. In fact, it was almost 2 years ago to the day, during the initial presentation of the noise results from the part-time shoulder use project. This figure essentially shows the benefits from the noise barrier in the Panaway Manor neighborhood. The green dots represent homes that are both impacted by noise and that would receive a benefit. The blue dots represent homes that, while they're not impacted by noise currently or under the future build conditions, they would still receive a benefit from that noise barrier. A benefit is anything that's 5 decibels or more. Noise, well, I'll get into that in a second. Then the yellow dots are areas that were neither impacted by noise, nor will they receive a benefit. And then if there were any red, which I don't believe this one shows, red ones would be ones that are impacted by noise but do not receive a benefit from the insertion of the barrier. Going back to what I was starting to say a few minutes ago, the noise benefits, noise benefits are anything that if you receive a 5 decibel or more reduction in noise, that's considered a benefit at that particular location. The human ear can only hear noise level differences up between, above 3 decibels. So differences in noise levels, say at 1 or 2 decibels, are not audible to the human ear. 5 decibels is noticeable. And then once you get up towards 7 to 8, 9, 10 decibels, that's almost half the noise. So the noise barriers in these locations, at this particular location, this noise barrier is providing noise benefits between 8 and 14 decibels. Noise is actually a logarithmic analysis. So when you get further from, say, 5 decibels, again, like I said, 5 decibels is a noticeable difference, but then, the amount of benefit from that at 10 decibels is half. So that's quite a big difference. So by 14 decibels, that's a substantial noise reduction. So these barriers here are going to provide quite a bit of benefits. So as I said, this barrier here will provide about an 8 to 14 decibel noise reduction. One of the aspects of this analysis involved, this type of project is the type of project that could in and of itself result in noise impacts, which is why we did the noise analysis to begin with. This is what it's known as a Type 1 project. Type 1 projects are those where you're adding lanes, changing the alignment of the roadway, et cetera. The part-time shoulder use project is intended to, during certain times of the year, is intended to essentially add another lane of traffic during those peak hours of of use of the turnpike. So since that addition of a lane results in what's known as a Type 1 project, we did a noise analysis. The noise analysis involved looking at the traffic, traffic conditions and the build conditions under that design, that project design. And we're not just looking at the existing traffic, we're actually looking into the future, looking at the projections of additional traffic that are anticipated 20 years into the future. So the noise analysis actually takes into account those conditions, and then we identify if there's any impacts under those future build conditions. And if there are, then we look at potential whether or not there's noise impacts in various neighborhoods. And then that results, when we identify a noise impact in a particular neighborhood, the next step is to identify if there's any feasible and reasonable noise abatement measures that could be implemented. Noise abatement basically being mitigation or in this case, the putting in a barrier which will alleviate the noise impacts that result from that project, and really, in all reality, from the turnpike, the noise impacts that already exist from the turnpike today. So during that analysis of the feasibility and reasonableness of those noise barriers, we look at, okay, feasibility, can we build it? The example I like to use is, say if you had a pond next to the highway, and then there was some homes on the other side of that were impacted by noise. In order to build a barrier, if you had to put a barrier through that pond, that would be infeasible. From an engineering standpoint, we just can't build it. Obviously, that's not the case here. There's very few of those types of engineering constraints that would make it infeasible to build a barrier. Then it comes down to reasonableness. Reasonableness really deals with, are we going to get enough benefit from building the barrier to justify the amount of barrier that needs to be put in? And so that analysis that was done and that we presented several years ago essentially identified these two locations that met both the feasibility and reasonableness criteria, and that's why we're here today, is to present the results of the design efforts that HNTB has put forth to design those barriers and bring them to construction, which Sam will get into as to when that will occur. So this particular neighborhood here, as I mentioned, there are 33 impacts within this neighborhood, and this noise barrier will actually provide benefits to 70 homes within the Panaway Manor neighborhood. That the effectiveness of this sound wall is 747. What that means is the amount of barrier is there's a surface area for the barrier, the vertical surface area, and what you do is you essentially, we calculate how much barrier there will be, divide that by the number of benefits, and that's your effectiveness criteria. If that exceeds 1,500 square feet per benefited household, then that's determined not to be reasonable, as I mentioned. This barrier is obviously at 747 is very reasonable, and it meets the criteria, and that's why we've proposed to build this in this location. So moving on to the next barrier. So similarly, this barrier will provide, just flip to this because I can read it better. There were 34 noise impacts identified within the Rockingham Ave, Edmond Ave neighborhood. And this barrier would provide 49 benefits. So 49 homes would receive at least a 5 decibel reduction or more. This barrier itself will require 72,180 square feet of barrier. Divided by the 49 benefits, that this has an effectiveness of 1,473 square feet per benefited household. As that's below 1,500 square feet, or in this case 1,600 square feet, this this barrier was determined to be reasonable, and that therefore it was proposed for construction. You will note, as Phil noted, there are going to be gaps over the bridges. From an engineering standpoint, at this point, there are substantial issues with being able to construct the barriers over the bridges. So they will stop. There will essentially be a gap over the bridges, but these do still provide benefits. However, there will be some homes around the Woodbury and Maplewood Ave neighborhoods, underpasses, that will, you can see here the red dots, as I mentioned before. Red dots mean that those are impacted, but they're not getting a benefit from this wall. And that's mainly because of those gaps that are resulting from the bridges. And then, next slide. So with that, I guess one thing I should also add is the privacy fence itself is intended to provide a visual barrier. It is not a noise mitigation measure. It's more of a visual barrier, and the main reason being that there are deciduous trees out there, and the idea behind that is that it will provide some additional visual protections for the school. So that's why we've also included the privacy fence that Phil showed earlier. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sam Newsom.
All right, so to quickly go over the current construction costs, for the total project costs, we're at about $15 to $16 million, at about a 60 to 70% stage in the project for design. The sound walls themselves are about $14.5 to $15.5 million. We're still fine-tuning the estimates because we haven't completed design yet. The privacy fence is about $500,000. Advertising-wise, so we're on schedule to advertise this project in April of '24, so mid-April. It will go out to bid, and then at that point, once it goes out to bid, we hopefully receive bidders, get a low bid, and then it will be approved moving forward. And at that point, it'll be another 2 to 3 months to get approval by governor and council, so we can give the contractor who won the bid notice to proceed to start the work, which would put us in summer of '24 to start construction. And then that will go through late spring of '25 to complete both sound walls and the privacy fence. So quickly, just putting our contact information up, and we can leave this up here afterwards, so anyone can jot down. My email's on there, the office number, John's is on there, and well as Phil. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us for questions. Feel free to reach out to all three of us. We'll make sure to get back to you. But at this point, we'll open it up for questions or comments. I know you're going to probably take a lot of the questions. I might invite you up here so I don't give the wrong answer for any of the noise and analysis-wise.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the questions. I'm going to open it up first just to the committee.
Okay.
Is there any questions that anybody in the committee has? We'll do questions after as well.
Oh.
Yeah, Erica?
Are you planning on revegetating the areas that you're going to have to clear for construction
On the highway side?
on the highway side or on the not highway side?
Most of the sound walls will be up against the limited access right-of-way fence,
Yeah.
so there won't be really any room. We are not planning on to revegetate the front side just for maintenance of the sound wall itself. Is that?
Thanks.
Okay, and I believe Monty and Ben have microphones that they can pass around the room for everybody that has questions.
Is this on? Great.
Sorry.
For the folks who have residences on the east side of 95, has there been any study or analysis of the effects of sound bouncing off that wall and compounding on the east side?
Sure. So there, as kind of a general rule of thumb, if you have, so that these barriers are about, in the order of, say, 20, 23 feet tall. If you're within the zone, I call it, it's kind of the zone of the 10-to-1 zone, basically. So if your barrier is 23 feet tall, if you're within the area of on the opposite side of the highway, that's within 230 feet. So the barrier, again, it's 20. So you essentially take the height of the wall and then multiply by 10, and that gives you the 10-to-1 zone. If you're less than that 10-to-1 zone, then noise could influence whether or not noise could bounce off the wall and essentially come back and cause a noticeable increase in the opposing neighborhood. In this case here, these barriers, any of the adjacent, the homes on the opposite side of the highway are outside that 10-to-1 zone. What that essentially means is that there actually would not be noticeable noise increases, or noise increases are not anticipated, to be noticeable in those opposing neighborhoods. The main reason is, and similar to, as I mentioned previously, noise is kind of, it doesn't, when you take two noise levels, say you have 60 decibels and 60 decibels, you stick them together, you don't get 120 decibels. What you actually get is might get, if you have 60 decibels and 60 decibels, you would get 61 decibels. As I think I mentioned before, noise levels, anything less than 2 to 3 decibels is not audible by the human ear. So if you're not within that 10-to-1 zone, that won't result in a 2 to 3 decibel increase, and therefore it will not result in noise impacts. And the model itself is actually able to take into account those potential increases, and those were evaluated and included as part of the analysis.
So if you could, I forgot to mention, when you ask your question, if you could just give your name and your address first, just for the notes, that would be excellent. Was that Tony that asked the last one?
Hello. Hi, Dee Dee Wallace, 2 Beechwood Street. I live on the east side. My first question is, if there's red dots on the northern end, the north side of Maplewood Avenue, on the homes there, why are you building that section? Because I live on the opposite side, and I fear that it's going to reflect not just noise, but air pollution. And even just the low median barrier has really increased the sound in my neighborhood. And I'm also wondering, is this all going to be constructed at night?
So I'll get into to that question in a second. So as far as the why is that smaller? Yep. As far as your first question regarding whether or not that section could be removed, the reason that we're still including that section is it is still providing noise reductions, and those are contributing to the. Dylan, if you could go back one slide. Yes, this slide. So if you look particularly on this side of the, I'm going to point. So in this area here, yeah, so in this area here, if we didn't extend this here, this home likely would now not be receiving the benefits, because you actually need to extend that barrier essentially at least three times that distance between the barrier to provide benefits. Otherwise, the noise essentially comes around the backside. And so what this is doing is it's actually blocking noise that's coming from this part of the neighborhood and going around this way. The problem is that you just have this gap that's right here, which actually still results in noise impacts. They are still getting some benefits. They're just not getting a 5 decibel reduction. That may be 3 decibels, so they may still be getting some a noticeable benefit. It's just not enough to qualify as a benefit in accordance with the policy. So that's why we really still need this section of barrier. And the same really goes down here as well. And
Yeah,
then Sam.
just to answer your second question, this will be work constructed during the day. They might need to do a handful of things at night, but this will be done pretty much behind barrier off the road during the day, so it should not be nighttime work for a majority of that work.
Do you have data to suggest it's not going to increase the smog on our side of the highway?
So noise barriers are not a form of air quality mitigation. As part of, as I mentioned previously, this project did undergo and is undergoing an environmental review. But this area of the state actually has really good air quality, and actually the entire state has really good air quality. We review air quality both from a kind of a regional planning aspect, and then we also review at the project level. Regionally, this is not the type of project that would result in any increases in any of or any violations of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, nor would this type of project be the type of project that would result in potential localized air quality. Typically, those are more related to, say, intersection projects, and it's usually for areas that are extremely close to the highway, say, or the roadway, really. Say you have a park that's 10 feet from the edge of an extremely busy intersection. That would be the type of circumstance. The two pollutants that are of concern in those circumstances are particulate matter and carbon monoxide. In this case here, with free-flowing traffic, and even in times of congestion, these are not the types of conditions where you would get even close to potential violations of those air quality standards, and so there would be no concerns related to air quality in this case.
Thank you. Peter Somsich, 34 Sweat Avenue. I'm the former state representative that represented this neighborhood, Panaway Manor, for many years. So I have a number of questions that I'd like to ask you, and if you excuse me, it might be, I'll just ask them all at once and maybe you can reply. Number one, just for definition purposes, if a noise decibel level goes from decibel 3 to decibel 5, do I understand that to mean at least 100 increase in noise level? The other comment or question I have is, first of all, after these barriers are built, will there be follow-up testing done to determine whether the theoretical modeling and calculations that were done beforehand actually resulted in what we expected to happen after the barrier is put in place, and also considers the additional traffic noise that will happen by traffic being on the breakdown lanes? And finally, there is a natural gas pipeline underground adjacent to Panaway Manor, and my question there is, well, will that gas line be on the roadway side of the barrier or on the housing side of the barrier? And just as a comment, I want to let you know that the neighborhood there has been waiting at least 30 years or more for mitigation to happen. So it would be a mistake to think that everybody's so grateful for it finally to happen when they saw how much tolls the state was taking in at the Hampton tolls during those 30 to 40 years. So we greatly appreciate what you're doing, and it's about time it was done. But, it's way overdue, and in the meantime, those residents have seen their property values go down and have had to put up with that noise all that time. Thank you.
Want to take first two, and then I'll take all. You remember?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember all the questions. Yes, so 3 to 5 decibels is, again, the sound pressure level is kind of irrelevant. In this case here, it's what the human ear interprets. So 3 to 5 is noticeable. It's about at the limit of what the human ear can hear, particularly at about 3. Less than 3, you can't tell the difference. 3, it's kind of noticeable. By 5, it's noticeable, and then above that, it's very noticeable. So.
How much more is it in the way of noise from going 3 to 5 or 6?
So double would be about 8 to 10. So it's less than double. It's somewhat relevant, and I'm not trying to dodge the question. It's somewhat relevant to how the person hears, but that's essentially the way it works. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. Yes, after the fact noise measurements. We typically wouldn't do those only because these are very substantial structures. They will provide a noise reduction, and then it's relevant to the conditions that exist at that particular time. So I could take measurements today, but I can't make the same traffic conditions after once the highway is built. So we don't actually, it's a common misconception that we take noise measurements to determine noise impacts. We actually don't. And again, this gets back to the reason that I said previously, was that we essentially can't put traffic conditions that don't exist yet under the build condition that doesn't exist yet, and traffic volumes that don't exist yet. So we have to use the model. The model is extremely accurate. It's actually required by all 50 states, by the Federal Highway Administration, and so that's how we determine noise impacts. Noise measurements are taken at select locations just to make sure that the model is working properly. Once we've verified that, and essentially what you're doing is you're actually measuring noise levels, and you have somebody else out there counting traffic, and you put that exact condition into the noise model, and if it's producing noise levels within a couple of decibels of what actually was measured, the model is working properly. So the model is then used to determine what the benefits are from the barrier, and then that will tell us what those benefits are. So there's really no advantage to taking noise measurements post-construction, because you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges. Was that all the noise?
Yep. Okay. The gas line, yep. So I'll take that question. The gas line is going to be between our limited access right-of-way fence and the sound wall. So it will be on the neighborhood side where it currently is. The gas line is not moving. We are working with Unitel to see if they want to do any upgrades to that line before the sound wall goes in currently. So that's in the works, but it's staying in the same location. To relocate that line throughout that whole corridor is a significant amount of money on Unitel's end. It would not be funded by us.
Bill St. Laurent, 253 Colonial Drive. I probably live on the most outer part, closest to the highway, of any of the houses there. And I understand it sounds like you've got going to be we could either end up with a 15-foot or a 20-foot fence. You can't step these down. I mean, you have to realize that if you put a 20-foot fence in my backyard, because I'm right on near the edge of the highway, that's like a prison wall. That's huge. 15 feet is one thing, but 20 feet, you should be able to step this down for the neighborhood. That is unheard of, to put such a huge fence or whatever. I mean, I'm terrible. For years I've been fighting to get a wall there, but please don't put a 20-foot fence in my backyard. That I don't know how you can do that. Oh, sorry. But yeah, there's got to be a way to step down. And if you keep it all the same height, the way I understand it, you could have saved money to put a barrier by the school. You can probably cut some expenses out and think about putting a barrier by the school. But please, I mean, I don't know if I heard you right, but a 20-foot fence is horrendous.
So what will, if we were to reduce the height of the barrier, the barrier height was set in order to provide the maximum number of benefits to that neighborhood. If we reduce the height, some of the neighborhood is going to lose benefits. So there would be homes that are getting benefits further back that would no longer get benefits. So that's why the height was set where it is. We essentially, the noise model allows us to put in different heights, and we figured out, okay, where are we getting the most benefits from that wall? Where are we getting the most bang for our buck, basically? And if we reduce that height, then you're going to lose benefits. The other thing is that we can't evaluate we can't say take away a portion of wall and then give it to another area that isn't otherwise feasible, because that's reasonable, because that's a separate neighborhood and a separate analysis. So we can't just kind of take it and kind of average it over the whole project area. That's essentially, our policy dictates that we have to look at each neighborhood individually. So we wouldn't be able to do that and comply with the policy itself.
It seems to me that a 15-foot fence on a high part is going to be 15-foot fence for the people who live there. For the people who are lower, 15-foot fence. I've seen your barriers. I've looked around, and they go up and down. I mean, they meet the topography of the land, and that 15 feet, wherever it is still going to be 15 feet for everybody on the other side of that fence. So I just don't.
It's providing a shadow of protection, essentially, and the higher the fence, the more protection it'll provide. And so, and what it would actually do, particularly for the, I'm not actually sure if you're are you in the Panaway Manor neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay, so that one is it meets our reasonableness criteria fairly well, but if, as you start to lose benefits, if we start to shrink that height of that wall, we could actually kick it out from being reasonable, because you would lose benefits, and then the entire wall could not be constructed. So that height is what it needs to be, or else we likely couldn't construct it at all.
Thank you.
Justin Richardson. I live at 586 Woodbury Avenue, so right near the area where there actually is a gap in the wall. I reached out to a friend of mine and a colleague who's a noise consultant with a firm down near Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was pointed towards the Federal Highway Administration's website on the sections called Highway Traffic Noise Barriers. One of the bullets that they emphasize is that sound barriers have to be tall, to echo what you were just saying, but my concern is that it also says that sound barrier walls should have no openings. And so my questions are threefold. One is, you know, if they're not being built now due to wind loads or other factors on the bridges, when can those be done? Or what alternatives were also looked at? I mean, is it possible to anchor a smaller wall in that section with less weight or wind shear on the bridge itself? The second thing that the consultant told me, and my second question, is he indicated to me, and I wrote it down here, that of course traffic sound levels can rapidly decrease or increase at nearby receptors when a noisy vehicle passes by the start or end of a barrier. And so my question is how did you evaluate, or how did your model evaluate the impact of those rapid decreases and increases? Because I know from, work on wind turbines and things like that, it's not just the A-weighted or C-weighted sound pressure levels that you're concerned about. If you have increases and decreases, that can have an adverse impact. So I'm curious how that was evaluated. And then my last question is, what are the atmospheric and other assumptions that are built into your model? Because I know from experience where my house is at the same level as the highway surface itself, it dips down the surface as it goes from Rockingham. There's like a valley there, and then I'm right at the highway level. Some days when there's like a temperature inversion, the sound is deafening. Other times it's not bothersome at all. And so I'm wondering, when you talk about impacts or no impacts, and I see that my house is listed as a no impact, that's not always true. Sometimes it's really bad, other times it's not at all. So I'm curious how you evaluated that in your modeling. And sorry for the long questions, but that's what I've been dying to ask. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I have the memory of a housefly. So the first question was what?
When will the gaps be eliminated? Because they are recommended by the...
Yes. So you are correct. The ideal noise barrier here would cover those gaps. The problem is that those bridges they were not constructed to be able to handle a noise barrier at this time, and so in order to retrofit them would be a substantial cost and effort that just kind of is outside of the scope of this project. So at this time we're not proposing to include those fill in those gaps, essentially. As far as when, it's possible that when we come through with a future project which would address those bridges, then we may be able to look at it, but I cannot guarantee that. We certainly are not going to make any promises as far as whether or not they would include a barrier or not.
Are there alternatives?
So we did evaluate the lightweight and in fact a noise barrier in that location. If we looked at potential designs, and a barrier at that location, we would really need to limit the height quite a bit. So even if we put a barrier over that bridge, it would kind of lower down as you go over the bridge. And in fact, that's consistent with what we've done around the other state. There are bridges that we constructed as part of the I-93 project where we do have barriers that go over bridges. And basically, you have the barrier, and then you go over the bridge, and it goes down. And that's just for structural needs. That comes into the kind of the feasibility aspect that I was talking about. At a certain point, the walls, ground can take a bigger wall than a bridge. So we looked at that, but we evaluated all the possibilities, and it just comes down to we're not prepared to do that level of project that's kind of outside of the scope of this effort.
How your model handles increases and decreases in sound power levels as vehicles become unshielded?
So the model itself looks at the noise impacts are identified using an hourly LEQ, which is an average over an hourly period of time. So while that may change the way the noise is, it wouldn't it wouldn't have an effect on the noise. The average hourly LEQ is what we're using, a weighted LEQ, to be exact. That wouldn't change that. That's kind of a change in the how the noise is distributed, not the level of the noise, essentially. So that would not be something that's considered a noise impact, nor is it really addressed.
But it does affect the community when that power level changes
Right, but there's no way of identifying that as whether or not that's an impact or not, because that's not a criteria of the Federal Highway Administration, and that's not a criteria that's part of our policy or 23 CFR 772.
I'm going to suggest that we move on if you want to talk to him afterwards about this, just because we have time constraints for the room. So I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask a question.
Yeah, and we can hang after for questions too.
Is there anybody that, thank you.
Good evening, Elizabeth.
Is there anybody that's a resident that wants to ask a question? Can we get to the residents first?
Yes.
No, I wanted to
Just your name and address, please.
Oh, Alice Wall, and I live at 633 Woodbury Ave. And I am in that section where there will be, there'll be an opening. So I would fall in the zero
The
impact noise impact.
Zero benefit? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
zero
saying?
benefit, yeah. How many houses, again, I know you mentioned it, will be impacted in the 5% approximate noise reduction group? How many houses?
Okay, if I'm understanding your question
I thought
correctly,
you
like how many get a benefit from the wall?
Yeah.
Dylan, can you go back? So this one here, there'd be 49 benefits. There's 34 impacts.
34 homes?
34 impacts that are out there, and then there will be 49 benefits.
49, okay, I thought that. 34 impacts meaning,
Over 66 decibels.
oh, okay. Okay, and 49, just 5%-ish area?
So it's a 5 decibel reduction that's
Five- oh,
considered
5
a
decibel, okay.
benefit. So if you get any home that gets a 5 decibel reduction or more is getting a benefit. So there's 49 of those. That's a noticeable decrease in noise.
And the 34 are greater than that? Greater,
34 are, so don't think of that as, without the barriers,
yes.
there's 34 homes that are above 66 decibels. The reason we use 66
So
decibels.
I would be one of those homes, if I'm in that location.
It depends on where you are, but.
Yeah, it's on the.
Are you a
cor-
red
it-
dot?
It's in the area. I'm a
Okay,
red dot.
then yes.
In the area of the opening on Woodbury Ave.
The reason we use 66 decibels is because if you and I were talking, say, 4 or 5 feet apart, a normal conversation comes out to be about 66, 67 decibels. So what that means is if the ambient levels, the levels around us, are above that, you and I have to speak up. And so that's an impact. It's not a health thing. You're not,
Right,
it's more of a,
not
are you?
assembly line decibels.
Right, exactly. We're not standing next to a jet engine or something like that. It's not going to cause hearing loss. It's just, it's causing you to change how you use your property. So that's why it's considered a noise impact. So that's why we use that level.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions?
Yes. Sorry.
Bob Lister, 69 Diamond Drive. First of all, I just want to say we're pleased that you're here this evening. Thank you very much for all your work on this. I also wanted to thank all the city people who worked on this as well, because this has been talked about for a long time, not only for the Panaway Manor people, but also the Edmund Ave, Rockingham. I would also like to say that I'm pleased that New Franklin School is getting something out of this, because originally they weren't part of the plan. So thank you very much for that. My question is the breakdown lane going to be used permanently with this? And also, is the greenery at New Franklin, did I hear you say that's going to remain? It's not going to be taken away?
Yep. So the part-time shoulder use is only going to be used during peak time. So that's not going to be a continual use of that lane. So it'll be over like peak weekends like Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, to alleviate the queuing and traffic, the backup in traffic. In regards to the trees for the Franklin School, that's going to be similar to, what's it, the offset for that is it? It's like fence is 10?
The privacy fence
5 feet to back, it's another 5.
Yeah. So the existing fence that's there, this will be going right on the backside. It's very close to that. So the plan for this is to leave as many trees there as possible. So there should not be a lot of removal in that area, and that's why we're also leaving that gap at the sign structure, because if we had to jog around the sign structure foundation, we would take most of the trees down all the way to our limited access right-of-way fence. So by leaving that gap there, we don't have to remove all those trees there as well.
Hi, Mary Hannon, 617 Woodbury Ave. I'm a red dot. And I just have a question on the aesthetics of it. You had a picture of what the finished product would look like. Is it that way on both sides?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Barbara Pambukas, 91 Cut Street. I live on the east end of the highway. And I just wanted a clarification as far as the rationale behind not protecting our side of the highway. Was our neighborhood dotted? Was there a study done on those houses? Because I know that we live there and it's very noisy.
Yes, so that area was studied. I'm sorry, you're in the neighborhood, but by the school? Oh, Cut Street.
But the east side.
So that entire area, what we found was the most cost-effective barrier for that section of the highway. Actually combined a barrier that would have brought I shouldn't say cost-effective, from an effectiveness index. The barrier would have started essentially just about at Woodbury Ave, and it would have continued all the way up past Cut Street, and essentially all the way up to about where the Irving tanks are. So and obviously there's an interchange in there, so there would have been gaps for that and whatnot, because you got to get the traffic from one side to the other. But the most effective barrier that we could provide from a reasonableness standpoint was 2,207 square feet per benefited household. So that exceeds that 1,500 to 16. In this case, it was a 1,600 square feet per benefited household criteria. And since it exceeds that amount, we're not getting enough benefit from that barrier to be considered reasonable in accordance with the policy.
But was our area studied for?
Yes. Yes, so noise impacts do exist in your neighborhood. Yep. The purpose of this meeting was to talk about the barriers that we are. So 2 years ago, we came and presented all those results. I can certainly discuss with you after the meeting kind of the results, in more detail. But yes, we did evaluate noise impacts in your neighborhood. And noise impacts were identified. We just can't get enough benefits from a barrier there.
All right, we're going to have 2 more questions, and then what we have is all the contact information is up there because we do have a full meeting before us today.
Okay.
I'll be fast. Steve Langevin, 673 Woodbury Avenue. This question's for John. I think you said it's about an improvement of about 15 decibels or so, and I was looking it up, and the compression brakes, which I feel is really the main concern. I don't mind the white noise of the traffic. It's really the compression brakes. And those can vary from around, say, 100 decibels from my Google search about 10 minutes ago. Would you say that the improvement of the sound walls, although I'm right down the street from these people, so I guess I'm a red dot or two, but would you say that improvement would be like about 15%? Is that reasonable if the benefits drop of 15 decibels and you have a 100 decibel noise? Would you say it's reasonable to assume that? Or I just like a little more information on that. And on the side, I'm a structural engineer, and I agree that you can't put a sound wall on a bridge.
So The key here is to understand that the way we measure noise impacts and benefits is an hourly average. It's not, so if we were to identify impacts based upon a single pass-by of a truck, you know, as a result of a Jake brake or whatnot, then there would be impacts virtually on every road in the state as one motorcycle goes by or a truck or something like that. So what we do is we're using an average over an hourly period essentially, and that identifies kind of the normal conditions. But what that does is means that sometimes you may exceed those levels, but then other times you may be below those levels. While I understand that those are that's annoying, it's not part of, you know, trucks are accounted for in the noise model. You know, it takes into account that trucks are louder and they may produce some of those noises. And we use the traffic volumes include volumes of trucks. And it's taking, you know, kind of what would those traffic conditions result in over an hourly average of the worst case noise hour of the occurring on a regular basis. So what that effectively means is you know, the Jake brakes are not directly accounted for, but these barriers will provide, you know, anything you can put between the highway and or the noise source and the area you're trying to protect is going to provide a reduction in noise. So this will help with that. But you may still, you know, if you pull out an Apple app or something that measures the instantaneous noise and you get a Jake brake behind the noise barrier, you may still exceed that 66 decibels for that split second, but that average over an hour is going to be less than that.
Thomas Morley, 30 Coakley Road. You explained the reasonable and feasible standards for the sound barriers, but could you talk to the privacy fence and how that was able to be funded and included in this project?
So that was more of a just in again, it goes back to so privacy fences aren't considered a form of noise mitigation. So then it just comes down to we heard concerns at the last meeting when we were here about not providing something in the area of the school. And we acknowledged the fact that, yeah, there's some vegetation out there, but in the winter it loses some of the trees lose their vegetation and whatnot. And the idea is to help maintain a more constant visual protection from the highway. And that the hope is that will, you know, and also there's a fence out there. We acknowledge the fact that fence is in very poor condition. So we're going to construct something that's more substantial, less susceptible to the impacts from the fence is most vulnerable to the overspray from the plows basically. And so this is a more substantial fence to try and alleviate that problem and hopefully have a nice privacy fence that will last many years.
Okay, with that, I'm going to end this portion of the meeting. But gentlemen, if I understand, you're going to stick around afterwards and people can ask questions in the hallway just adjacent here. And their contact information is up on the screen here so that you can get in touch with them after the meeting as well. The public is here for multiple issues tonight. It's been well over an hour. Sorry, so we're going to move on to the Middle Street, Miller Avenue, Summer Street intersection improvements by Sebago Technics Incorporated. Yeah, I think so.
Peter.
Yeah, let's just give it like a couple minutes so everybody can clear the room. It's tough because we have so many people waiting for both ends.
An unhappy Western Side Highway resident here would have liked to have said a lot.
Okay, I think it's fair.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. The next item is the presentation by our consultants for the Middle Miller Summer Street intersection. This is an ongoing design project. It was started a couple of years ago. They were here to present the first two alternatives for the intersection a couple of years ago. And at that time, the committee asked them to come back with a third alternative, and they are here tonight to present that third alternative as well as a brief recap of how we've gotten to this point. The intent is to try to reach a consensus tonight on the design for this intersection so that we can finish the design and get it out to bid for construction next year. And with that, I will turn it over to a presentation to Bradley Lyon from Sebago Technics.
Thank you very much, Eric. Once again, Brad Lyon. I'm a traffic engineer with Sebago Technics, which is a consulting firm that's contracted with the city of Portsmouth for the improvement of this intersection. Go to the next slide, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, we were in front of some of you were at this meeting actually, we're in front of the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee meeting in January of 2022. At that meeting, we reviewed a lot of information. First and foremost, it was the project purpose and need. Just since it's been the better part of just over a year, I'm going to revisit some of those alternatives that we talked about, and also for the benefit of the public that didn't get to hear, review those two alternatives, and then also visit for the first time this third hybrid alternative that the committee asked for. So first and foremost here, it's important to identify the purpose and need for the project. Once again, this is at the intersection of Middle and Summer. The purpose, which you can read here, and I'll just read off the screen, it's to modernize the existing traffic signal control equipment and provide increased mobility and safety for all users, including vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And for this project in particular, I certainly want to accentuate the need for all users, and that's what we're kind of focusing on here today. The need, for those of you that are familiar with the intersection, should be fairly obvious, but it's demonstrated by the outdated and the aging signal equipment and the pedestrian infrastructure, the pedestrian landings, the push buttons. A lot of the equipment out there isn't up to current ADA standards or the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is obviously very important as we touch and improve these intersections. Again, circling back to the need to improve the intersection for all users. You can go to the next slide, Eric. Once again, project location. We're at the intersection of Middle and Summer. Throughout this presentation, I may be referencing cardinal directions, so just to make sure we're using the same language here. Middle Street we're defining as the main line, so for the purposes of this, defining Middle Street as northbound, southbound. So when I say northbound, I'm referring to traffic that's heading inbound towards downtown area, and then southbound is heading outbound. And then we've also got the intersection of Miller Street, otherwise known as Route 1A, and then Summer Street. So Miller Street, I'm referring to that as westbound, Summer is eastbound. We're just to the north of Cabot Street, and we're approximately 1,300 feet or so south of the signalized intersection of State Street. So that's the subject location. Next slide, Eric. So some of the existing conditions focusing on the signal equipment itself. Obviously, it's a four-way signalized intersection today. This intersection operates as a fixed time intersection, meaning there is no detection out there for vehicles today. The reason that's important is regardless of the time of day that vehicles might enter the intersection, this signal will cycle through all phases on all approaches, regardless of demand. So if there's, for instance, 20 seconds programmed on the side street, that 20 seconds will be serviced both during peak times and then in the middle of the night. The reason that's important is if we're servicing approaches that doesn't have vehicles on it, obviously that's a less efficient operation, and there's ways to improve that through vehicular detection. We have pedestrian crosswalks on all approaches. Signalized crosswalks operate as two different modes or two potential modes, concurrent or exclusive. Concurrent means when pedestrians are crossing with traffic, so vehicles are going, pedestrians are kind of crossing parallel with it. Exclusive means pedestrians get their own signalized phase independent of the vehicles. This intersection today operates as exclusive pedestrian phasing, and this project is proposing to keep that as is. Bicycle facilities, those of you that are familiar with the area, there are share rows out there today, basically designating that bicyclists can share the lane with vehicles. There are no designated bicycle facilities or bike lanes out there today. And then emergency vehicle preemption. There are locations throughout the city where emergency services have the ability to preempt the signal or flush traffic to respond to an emergency. This intersection does not have that. The proposal for the signal equipment is obviously to include that. Real quick, I'm going to not spend a lot of time on this. I'm just going to go through a couple street view views here of the different approaches. So this first one is looking north on Middle Street, so looking towards downtown. Couple items of note here. There is a mast arm at the location, but there is only one signal head for the northbound, southbound approaches, overhead signal head, I should say. The rest of the signal heads at the intersection are supported by 10-foot pedestal poles. Reason that's important is obviously where we can, we like to have the signal heads above the lanes such that they're more visible. The other thing to bring to attention, and it'll probably be evident on the next slide, Eric, if you go to that one. So we just did a 180 on Middle Street, so now downtown's behind us. We're looking southbound. Similar situation, one signal head for that approach. Probably very difficult for you guys to tell, but the standard these days for new signal heads is to have 12-inch LED indications for your green, yellow, and red. This is kind of a mix. There's 8-inch and there's 12-inch, and you can see the colors are different. There's yellow, there's black. There's some signal heads that have back plates. There's some that don't. So obviously this project will focus on providing uniformity to all the approaches, and where we can provide signal heads on the mast arms themselves. You can go to the next slide, Eric. So this is on Summer Street looking east. Again, no signal heads overhead, just pedestal poles. There's not a great picture of it, but the pedestrian push button's on the corner there. It does not, like I mentioned earlier, does not meet ADA, meaning the push button itself to meet ADA requirements these days has to be an audible push button. So those annoying little chirps you hear on the button, there's a reason for that. It's so a visually impaired person can locate where that button is and be able to push it. And then there's confirmation that tells a visually impaired individual when it's safe to cross. So those buttons will be updated, as well as improving the signal heads. Other item of note for both these side streets, you'll see the no turn on red sign there. There's also one on Miller Street. Our intent is to keep the no right turn on red. There's a reason for that. There's difficulty with sight lines, being able to accurately determine when there's a gap in traffic such that you can make that maneuver. And also, given the sheer geometry of the intersection and where these crosswalks are located, there's not clear sight lines for someone to be able to tell if someone's crossing. So since we're providing exclusive pedestrian phasing, right turn on red is something of concern that we need to be aware of. So restricting that to enhance the safety for pedestrians is important. And then obviously the side streets are skewed. It's kind of an offset intersection. We're not proposing to improve that as part of this because really we're focused on what's happening in between the curbs and the signal infrastructure itself. You can go to the next slide. Similar situation here, not a lot to talk about. The one point here is the signal cabinet is pole mounted. We will be moving that to a more standard foundation ground mounted cabinet. We're obtaining an easement in order to be able to do that on the Temple lot. That's just for the safety of those technicians and city staff working in the cabinet, such that they're not right on top of traffic, and just helps with maintenance. I think that's it on that slide, Eric. This diagram is probably very difficult for you guys to see. These are our design volumes that we're using for the intersection. Counts were actually done at this intersection back in June of 2021. That's when we first started the design on this. 12-hour turning movement counts were conducted for the intersection, and really 3 peak hours were identified: traditional AM peak, a PM peak, and a Saturday peak. Of note here, those of you that are familiar with this area, it's probably not a surprise to you. The AM peak hour from a volume perspective generally represents what's out there for the Saturday peak hour. Saturday peak hour, we're identifying, I believe it's 1:15 to 2:15, so just after noon, which is pretty typical. Your AM is 7:45 to 8:45, and your PM is 3 to 4. This is going to be important to kind of keep in mind as we look at these alternatives. So the big thing we're trying to mitigate out here is the turning traffic on Middle Street. So they're all single lane approaches today, meaning there's not dedicated left turn lanes for motorists to get in and be able to make a left turn. So when you look at these volumes, these are the design volumes we're using. So it represents a 10-year build out. Of note, Middle Street, the left turn volume represents anywhere between 25 to 40% of the total approach volume. And that's pretty significant, which means today, if a motorist is in the front of the queue and wants to make a left turn, traffic behind that motorist might be queued up if they don't have the ability to bypass. There's pretty wide shoulders out there today that double up as on-street parking, so traffic for the most part, for those of you that are familiar, someone will pull out in the middle of the intersection, traffic will bypass. We don't love that as traffic engineers because that puts bicyclists in the area of conflict with those motorists driving by not paying attention. So that certainly serves the need to provide a left turn lane for the southbound direction or outbound. And then interestingly enough, Middle Street northbound, that volume is much less. It represents about 5% of the total approach volume. Again, shouldn't be surprising for those of you that are familiar with the area, but that's some of the volumes that are kind of being incorporated into our analysis as we evaluate these alternatives. So again, 2 alternatives were presented to the committee back in January of 2022, for those of you that remember. So alternative 1 was basically maintaining the existing lane configuration. Alternative 2 was providing dedicated left turn lanes for both southbound and northbound approaches. And then the alternative 3 that the committee asked us to look at was evaluating what the intersection would look like if we only provided a left turn lane for the southbound or outbound direction, given that that was a much higher volume and the northbound direction was so low. They wanted to see what the impacts were with that. And so I'll go through some of these points in more detail. I think it's more appropriate to kind of talk over the plan. So if you want to go to the next slide, Eric, and I'll get a little more detail here. I apologize for those of you that can't see the scale, but I believe these plans, if those of you that printed out the agenda are at the back of the agenda, you can look at a little closer. I'll try to articulate some of the improvements here. So this is deemed alternative 1. Once again, it maintains the geometry on all 4 approaches as far as the vehicular geometry is concerned. One recommendation here, given the sheer volume of left turns, is we were proposing to do an advanced protected left turn phase for the southbound direction. The need for that is such that if you look at like the bold black line, I don't have my pointer on me, the bold black line represents us, thank you, represents us trying to choke the intersection in, narrow it up. And the reason for that is we're trying to reinforce the fact that on-street parking really isn't allowed within 30 feet or so from the intersection. Also helps to define these dedicated bike lanes that we're proposing in the immediate vicinity of the intersection. So if I work like south to north, for instance, on-street parking gets maintained. You've got sharrows for the shared lane between vehicles and bicyclists. And then there's kind of a quick merge where bicycles are able to get in front of the queue if needed. The idea there is they become a little more visible to motorists, and the same kind of happens in the southbound direction. And so with us narrowing up this intersection, the ability to bypass is minimized because, again, we're trying to reduce that conflict. But the volume remains the same. People still want to make a left turn on Miller Street. So the recommendation here was for an advanced left turn phase. And I'll speak through some of the results of that and what that means to the intersection at a later slide. But I think that's, that speaks to most of the improvements on this alternative. You can go to the next one. And I should actually talk about the signal equipment too. The signal equipment changes apply to all three. None of the signal equipment is changing, so I'll speak to that here. So certainly for the signal equipment itself, just backing up a second, that mast arm that you saw on those street views, that will be replaced. There'll be a new mast arm meeting current New Hampshire DOT standards with a correct foundation design. That's proposed to go on the corner of Miller and Middle, which is a different corner than where the existing mast arm is today. Again, you see the ground-mounted foundation, the cabinet there. And as best we can, we're trying to get all those signal heads on the mast arm. So you see for the southbound approach, for this alternative, it requires 3 signal heads, 1 for the dedicated left turn lane, 2 for the through, 3 signal heads for the northbound approach, again, all overhead. And then for the, I'm going to call it the eastbound Summer Street approach, that's going to be supplemented by pedestal poles, so 10-foot pedestal pole for that approach. And then Miller's going to be on the mast arm itself as well. Further improvements that apply to all approaches, or excuse me, all alternatives are, again, the ADA improvements, so there'll be APS push buttons on all corners. The pedestrian landings or the ramps would all be redone, brought to standards such that they're flat enough, such that if a wheelchair wants to stop at the landing, they have the ability to do so. Sometimes what we see is these landings become too steep, so a wheelchair can't stop on it. So there would be some minor geometric improvements to flatten those out. Put what's called detectable warning panels or warning fields at the intersection, again, for visually impaired people so they know they are entering the intersection. That would be included. Again, all new signal heads, all new backplates. You would see that retroreflective border that you see around the city. Those would be applied. And then obviously all new signal equipment, new controller. And then new detection such that if you come up to this intersection in the middle of the night on the main line, it really should just be resting on green until someone on the side street wants to enter. So operations from a vehicular perspective should be greatly improved as well. Getting back to this alternative, you see the introduction of left turn lanes, both for the southbound, northbound direction. In order to get these left turn lanes in and still incorporate some sort of bicycle facilities, there is an impact to on-street parking. I have a slide kind of quantifying the impact on street parking across all these alternatives, so I'll talk specifics on that when I get to that slide. I think that's it on this one, Eric. Yeah, and this one's a little weird, but this is the third hybrid alternative. So again, heading outbound in the southbound direction, really nothing changes because we're keeping the left turn lane, the bike lanes are there, the on-street parking is there. The big change between 2 and 3 is in the northbound direction. So the left turn lane is eliminated, but you will see there's what we're trying to designate as striping there in the middle. And the reason for that is to align the northbound through lane with the lane opposite the intersection. Because now that we're providing this left turn lane, we have to do what's called shadowing, just kind of get the alignment such that vehicles are looking where they should go. So from a width perspective, within the immediate vicinity of the intersection, the impacts are essentially the same, but we're able to taper back to existing quicker. So there won't be a dedicated turn lane in that direction, and therefore the impacts to parking are less with this alternative. I should mention wherever there are dedicated left turn lanes provided, so in this alternative, in the southbound direction, and then the second alternative, both in the northbound, southbound direction, those turns would be controlled by what's called protected permissive left turn phasing. So what that means is at the front end of the cycle, motorists would get a green arrow to be able to cross without any conflict. And then that would transition to a flashing yellow arrow or a green ball like what's there today, making motorists kind of wait for a gap in traffic. So all left turn lanes, where formal left turn lanes are provided, the control would be through protected permissive phasing. And that would be incorporated as part of the signal design. Yeah, I think that hits the high points on this. And again, we'll circle back to the capacity results here on the next slide. And then I'll talk about parking on the final slide. So you can go to the next one, Eric. A lot of numbers on this slide. As traffic engineers, we love numbers, so I'll try to keep this pretty brief. You're looking at two analysis periods here. You're looking at the PM peak hour, and you're looking at the Saturday peak hour. So the table on the top represents the PM peak hour results. The table on the bottom is the Saturday. The columns, there's 3 columns there. They represent the 3 alternatives I just showed you. The rows represent the approach delay. So the first row is Summer Street eastbound. Second row is Miller Street or 1A westbound. And then we got Middle Street, both northbound, southbound. So you'll see there's numbers in there. That number represents the delay, which is measured in seconds per vehicle, or the average delay in seconds per vehicle during that peak hour. For signalized intersections, there's what's called level of service. So these numbers equate to level of service. Level of service is graded through A through F. A is optimal, F is unacceptable, and it kind of goes down from there. So you can see how these alternatives compare. So you can see under alternative 1, and this probably shouldn't be a surprise to too many people, since we're not adding additional lanes, there's not a huge benefit from a level of service perspective. And when I talk level of service, this is just for the vehicles. I'm not talking about pedestrian level of service or bicycles. So this is just how efficient are we moving vehicles through the intersection. So we got levels of service E in there. I've highlighted those in red. Those are generally not great. And then we got D's in there as well. The last row I should mention is the overall intersection level of service. So this takes all the approaches, averages them together, and kind of gives you a letter grade on the operation of the intersection as a whole. So what's interesting here is you can see the effect of, if you recall, alternative 1 has a single lanes. We're also doing an advanced left turn. So in order to do an advanced left turn, all modern vehicular detection equipment has no ability to be able to tell whether that first vehicle is making a left or going through. We program that based on the lanes that vehicles are in. Therefore, during the peak hours, every cycle, we have to provide an advanced left turn for that southbound, which means whether that first vehicle wants to make a left or not, the northbound traffic is having to wait. And you see the effect to the level of service here when you look at it, when you compare it to the other options. Alternative 2, between both the PM and the Saturday peak hour, performs the best. Again, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise because that's the option where we're providing left turn lanes in both directions. But interestingly enough, when you look at alternative 3, where we're only providing a left turn lane in the southbound direction, it performs worse than alternative 2, but it's within seconds from a performance standpoint. So you can see removing the left turn lane for the northbound direction doesn't have a great effect because, again, there's not a lot of traffic making that maneuver today. So it speaks to not providing the lane for that movement. Similar results on the Saturday peak hour. Again, alternative 1, D's and E's, not great. Once you provide left turn lanes, those D's and E's improves to C's and B's, and we still get some D's there. The one thing I should mention is, this is based on modeling. It's 2032 volumes. Due to the pandemic and all the changes we've seen a lot of changes in travel behavior. We try to predict that as best we can, but things do change, development occurs, so we try to account for that. The one thing this project will allow us to do is the vehicular detection that'll be out there, that'll have the ability to count traffic 24/7, 365. So the city will have a robust database of traffic volumes as trends change. And so therefore, with the detection that's available, they'll be able to retime the signal to best suit the needs of the intersection. So this is just kind of long shot how we think things would operate, but obviously there'll be some increased flexibility as far as the level of service is concerned. And then we can go to the last slide. This is a pretty simple table. I mentioned I wanted to talk about the impact to on-street parking. There's really no formal strike parking out there today. So best we could tell, we tried to estimate what the available parking is across these different alternatives. So again, columns represent alternatives 1 through 3. The rows represent both sides of the Middle Street intersection, south and north. So alternative 1, again, shouldn't be a surprise where we're not adding lanes. That provides the most parking, 27 spots, 20 to the south, 7 to the north. Essentially, really no change from what's out there today. Again, we're reinforcing the fact you can't park within the immediate vicinity of the intersection. Moving to alternative 2, that has the most impact on street parking. Those 20 available spaces south of the intersection get reduced to 6, 7. North of the intersection goes down to 4, so not as bad, for a total of 10. And then alternative 3, that hybrid option where we eliminate the left turn lane for the northbound direction. South of the intersection, 10 spaces. North of the intersection, 4, for a total of 14. So again, a lot of things to consider. We're working with the city, hopefully, to try to advance an alternative to formally go out to bid and get this thing constructed. But there's a lot of factors here at play, both the impacts to bicyclists, safety of the intersection, capacity of the intersection, obviously impact to parking. So goal here today is kind of get your thoughts, open it up to a Q&A, have some discussion on the intersection, and see what we can do to move forward. So thank you for your time. And with that, I guess I'll open it up to question and answer, Eric. That's
Yeah,
fine
thank
with you. Or?
Thank you for the presentation, and I'll open it up first to the committee for questions on the 3 options. Erica?
I got lots.
Figured you would. No, you're good.
Video detection, I assume?
What's that?
Video detection?
Yes,
So
above ground, yep.
It can detect bikes then?
Yep. There's a few brands that do. We would specify the brand that can. Yeah, not all brands can, just for clarity, but yes, there would be bicycle detection provided. Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about what assumptions you made in terms of the growth rates and adjustments you're using?
Yeah, so we did both a seasonal and an annual adjustment. So the seasonal, since we did the counts in June, there wasn't a drastic improvement there. It was, I think we adjusted about 1% for a seasonal, and then it was 1% annually for a 10-year build-out. So the counts were done in 2021. At the time when we did the analysis, we assumed a 2022 build year. Obviously, that would need to be adjusted a little bit. So it was 1% annually growth for all approaches.
Were you adjusting to the peak month or the average month?
Peak, 30th design hour, which is why that was pretty low, because the counts were done in June.
Do you know what the existing delay in level of service is with the current setup?
It's pretty similar to what's in alternative 1.
Okay.
I don't have those number. Oh, I probably do. If you want to ask your next question, I can get that for you.
Are you committed to a straight median instead of raised median?
Am I committed to it? That's ultimately a staff decision. I think the concern, I hesitate to speak for staff, I think the concern with a raised median would be maintenance first and foremost. The other thing the straight median does, not that we want to promote this, but it does provide a little flexibility for those motorists that do want to make a left turn. They can kind of cheat in that space a little bit, although it won't be a formal signalized movement. It does provide us a little flexibility. The proposal right now, based on my conversations with city staff, would be to keep that as a straight median for now. But that's not to say, as part of a future project that turns out that it's working well, you could convert to raised. I mean, the edge lines and everything would stay, so it'd really just be offsetting that a foot and putting, sloped granite curb in or whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
Any more committee questions? Dave?
Are there going to be, for example, if you went with an alternate 2, where you have a fairly significant bike lane heading southbound past the intersection, would that be marked no parking here to some extent where you've got that laid out? And are those parking spaces as shown, are those going to be striped once this is done, or are you just going to leave it open?
Don't know the answer. That's ultimately up to the CSR whether they want to stripe those stalls in there. Certainly where we're pulling in the curb, where we have the 5-foot bike lane, that would want to be signed to reinforce the no parking. Yeah, there's no question there. We don't want anyone parking in the bike lane if there's not space for vehicles to park. So certainly reinforcing that beyond just striping would be a goal for sure. And it's a great comment.
Maybe that's a question for Eric. Are you planning on striping those, or is it?
The parking spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we see, especially if we see a problem with them encroaching too close to the intersection, yeah.
Steve?
I'm kind of intrigued by alternative 3, but I'm a little concerned with just the painted inbound island and what you said as cheating as a possible positive. I view that.
I know, I
as
shouldn't have said that.
exactly exactly what we're trying to prevent. So that concerns me that we don't encourage cheating either by raising the island or, to me, it feels a little suburban design instead of an urban intersection.
That's fair.
But certainly leaning towards 1 or 3 as being an improvement from what's there.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would instead of calling cheating, I would say accommodating. If you had a larger truck that was trying to get onto Miller Ave, it would give them the opportunity to swing out a little bit to come in. So I think it's a reasonable accommodation.
Fair enough.
Yeah, the other concern ends up being if you put something raised there, it's also the turning movements coming off the side streets. If you get a large truck that wants to make a turn, obviously a median there makes that a little more difficult. We're trying to provide some traffic calming as best we can to neck down that intersection. A median makes those movements even more difficult.
Maybe some textured concrete.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's other treatments besides just striping, for sure. Yeah.
Erica?
But there isn't any other neck down in alternative 3.
Cool.
Right? Like we're
Do you mind
keeping
bring that
the
up, Eric? Is it possible to bring up
pavement
that
line's the
concept
same.
again? Mostly so I don't have to look at myself on the TV.
Right? Like the pavement, the edge of pavement
Yeah,
is the
so
same. It's
the curb's not moving in, but where that through lane is now closer to the curb, because if you're providing more space, because we're kind of doubling up as that bike lane. I'm explaining this poorly, but in this area, there is kind of a neck down here, because this through lane is not here today. I mean, it's a couple feet. It's not a lot, Erica, but you can kind of see this. Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
You told me not to touch it, and I touched it. The gray line represents the existing center line.
Yeah.
Which is obviously, since it's a single lane approach, we're now shifting to the west by 3 or 4 feet there. It's not as drastic as an alternative 1, because we need the space to also put in a left turn lane. That's why we're able to get a left turn lane in without widening. Something's got to shift.
Yeah.
Right? So.
If we have to vote on one of these 3 choices tonight, I feel like 2 is a non-starter. I think it's.
Erica, we're still in the
Okay.
question and
I
answer
wasn't sure if
standpoint,
we're
and then
getting to
we're
the-
going to jump to the
All right. I will
discussion
keep
later
my
in the meeting.
Conclusions to myself right now.
So just like we did with the sound barriers, we don't always open up after presentations to questions. We're going to open up for questions particular to this, which will then be followed by public comment, which pertains to anything in the PTS meeting agenda tonight. And then we'll move on with the agenda. So if there's any questions from the crowd, residents first.
Mr. Chair? Hey.
Yes.
Chair. Yeah, look this way.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I missed.
So focused on the screen. Sorry. Okay, I just had a quick comment.
Sure.
Residents are concerned about on-street parking, whether it's residential or businesses. And the option 3, which is an alternate in the what's it called, the hybrid.
Yeah.
And that's 11 spots being removed to accommodate for what?
A safe intersection.
Yeah, it's alignment of the northbound direction such that it lines up with the receiving lane, and then it's also to provide a left turn lane in the southbound direction. If we wanted to keep the parking that's there and have these improvements, we would need to widen the intersection and move the curb line closer to the buildings and reconstruct sidewalk, and that's certainly outside the scope of this project.
That question is being asked based on public input.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
That I'm hearing. That's it.
Anybody else on this side of the? Sorry about that. All right, I'll open it up to the public.
It's not working.
I mean, I can hear you, but.
No,
it's not.
The
I
battery
think it
might be
is.
dead. I see Kevin looks to be coming into the room.
Yeah. Save the day. Well, Well, if you want to ask your question up here, I don't know if that's appropriate.
Yeah,
If you want to use this
if you can
mic.
go to the podium, just so if anybody's watching the recording.
Everybody can hear me anyway.
We need it for the recording.
Just repeat it if,
Oh, okay.
you could just repeat the question.
You want to use this mic?
All right.
There you go.
Yeah,
it's working
okay,
now.
great. Alan McGee, 26 Summer Street. I'm at the red light. There's a lot of talk about the efficiency of the vehicular movement, and with an emphasis on north-south, on Middle Street. And that's all well and good. And there's been talk about safety as well, upgrading the equipment and all of the rest of it. I think one issue that has not been addressed as far as safety is the east-west, Summer and Middle. We, on Summer Street, have a speed limit of 30 miles an hour. That's 3 blocks with 3 stop signs. What tends to happen is people will be coming down, say from Immaculate Conception, and they see the light is changing. So rather than slow down, they speed up. And we have it the same way coming from Miller. Got to make it through the light. And there should be some consideration as to the safety of people entering from east-west as well as north-south, because it's just a dangerous situation. We have elderly going up to the 2 churches, going over to Cabot Street Market, and I worry because, and there are children in the neighborhood as well. That it's an untenable situation. If we're talking safety at that intersection, I think this needs to be addressed as well. Not just the north-south, but the east-west as well. And I know that vehicular movement and safety are not mutually exclusive, but I think the scope of the whole project needs to be expanded to include that consideration as well.
Great, thank you. Director Rice, do you want to speak to that one?
No, I think it's a good comment. It's definitely something we're aware of, and it's something that we're, it's not part of this immediate scope, but it is part of when we rework Summer Street, it is part of that discussion. And Dave DeFosis,
We actually had a response for that too. So Dave DeFosis, Public Works. One of the things you're seeing is because the light has no vehicular detection, as Brad said in his initial presentation, the light turns green, then it turns green, then it turns green. So whether you're going down a hill, sometimes the light's already green. Under the detection scenario, it won't be green because unless there's a vehicle there already stopped waiting for it to turn green. So that should help that a little bit. We understand what you're saying about the speed limit on Summer Street. I had a house in your neighborhood too, so I'm very aware of it. But I think just because of the nature of the vehicular detection is going to be changing, that should help that, albeit a little bit.
Hi, Cristiano, 298 Middle Street. I'm second house in from the corner. I prefer, and I think most of our residents do, alternative 1. The parking is horrendous in the neighborhood between Margarine Apartments. There's over 200 people there. The next door neighbors all around us have multiple apartments, and there's no place to park. By going to alternative 2 and 3, there won't be any place. They'll have to park blocks away, and our neighborhood is just jammed with back-to-back parking, people parking in front of driveways. It's really an issue. I would suggest where you have a bump out on the corner is to further bump out in front of our house, 298 Middle Street, another 2 spots, which would create a little green bump out in front of those 2 buildings. You'll lose 2 spots there, but there is spot across the street to Margarine Apartment. You can gain 1 spot in the middle of their parking, and then on the other bump out where you have the mast arm in the parking lot that you're proposing, there's a potential 4 to 5 spots there. Your total with that plan, if you move it that way, you could net 30 to 31 parking spots. that's huge for our neighborhood. That's huge for our neighborhood. We need the parking. And this way, it would squeeze the end of that end of that Miller Street to be a straight run, and it would create a slower area to be more safe and also decrease the sound. So it actually squeezes it at the intersection, which will be a safer intersection.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Evan Mullen, 82 Austin Street. My driveway is on Summer Street. I'm on the corner, so got a front row seat here and use this intersection multiple times a day. I do want to take the chance to thank you all on the committee for all the work you're doing. As our beautiful city grows, what you're doing and your efforts are critical in keeping us all safe. So thank you, and thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I want to voice my support for option number 3 with a couple of comments. If you don't mind, would we be able to pull up option 1 on the screen? So the reason that I support option 3 is because of the turning lane left on Middle Street outbound, I believe alleviates a lot of the issues that I think the gentleman's statistics supported as well. I support what my assumptions are as a user of the intersection. I'm usually turn left coming inbound to go to my street, but as the numbers point out, there isn't nearly as much of a demand for left-turning vehicles on that street as there is coming from the other direction. So I think a turning lane on the outbound Middle Street side would be highly effective. What I do like about option 1 that I think is important is that the I had a pointer that's not working. Oh, it's just not bright enough. Okay, so what I like about option 1 is that the corners of the sidewalks at the intersection emphasize the offset in the axis of Summer to Middle, which helps to slow traffic down just a bit. Which one? The middle one, yeah, okay. That doesn't want to do it either. That's okay.
All right, I'll try.
I think you get the point. The point is that in option 1, the enlarged corners of the intersections emphasize visually to create a visual effect to slow traffic going in all directions that I think is effective. I also think that it emphasizes the offset between Summer and Miller. And I do want to speak in more detail about the traffic speeding issue that we have on Summer Street, but I think that's a conversation for your normally scheduled meetings. But I think that that offset helps slow traffic coming down through there from Summer Street. So that I do think that's important. And I do think, again, I'll just reiterate that the traffic turning left has a lane on the outbound direction to be able to turn onto Miller Ave. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Joe Frieda, 40 Summer Street. Thank you, committee, for giving us a preview on this so we can understand and know and be able to help in the process of completing this project, and we do know it's needed. So we appreciate that. I would like to say that I like option 1. The way Chris has mentioned option 1, I think that's option 1 is good, but I like what Evan has proposed with option 3, the portions that he noted in option 3. So I would vote for option 1 with some of the caveats that Evan had proposed in option 3. And I can also verify that we will work together, all right, and make sure that we address the safety committee with the issues that we have on the speed on the street. All right, and we know where we can do that properly. it is a real big issue, as Alan noted. It truly is. We watch the cars go by very quickly across that street in front of us. So it's option 1 with some caveats on option 3. I think you guys can design it, quite well with that, and appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I walk this area quite regularly, and most of the neighbors know me from just seeing me. But I did want to say that on option 3, the cheat lane, I think, is a real great idea for cyclists. Because when a cyclist is coming towards, when a cyclist...
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to work on that. The thing I like about option 3 is that cheat lane. I would like it to be marked not as a cheat lane, but as a regular lane, since cars already go by each other there anyway. I think there seems to be enough room for them to do that. But the reason I like the idea of having the cheat lane is because it would help move traffic forward, and it would also allow bicycles to be able to tell that that car is going to go left. So when you're on a bicycle riding towards downtown, or you want to head to the beach and you're down on Middle Street, it's tricky to tell sometimes because some people don't know that you're supposed to use blinkers. And so they just jot right out in front of you. Where having an advanced green would let bicycles know that those cars are going to be going left, and having an actual pseudo lane, whatever you want to call it, would be helpful for bicycles as well. I did want to mention that a lot of the new, I forgot the word in English, but anyway, the new traffic lights are going up higher, but when you come up on them, you can't see them anymore during when you have the sun in your eyes. So the lights that are lower are easier to see when the sun is in your eyes, and that's a east-west road, and it lines up very nicely with the sun at certain times of day. So I would appreciate it if, when you're looking at adding those higher lights, that you actually come by in the morning and in the evening at different times of year to check whether it's visible on Islington Street. I mean, not on Islington, on Bartlett, when you get to Islington at 7 a.m., sometimes you can't see the light at all, and you used to be able to see the lower light. So that's another street that's east-west, and that may be an issue for some of those cars. The last thing I wanted to say is I would prefer to see that pedestrian light to be an on-demand light, and all 4 intersections be able to cross at the same time, because a lot of kids, when they come from school, they get to that intersection and then they go diagonally across. And I think if all the cars aren't stopped at the same time, it could be a hazard, and it might be something to watch for as you're doing your research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to expand upon a couple comments and answer one of the questions you had. So I'm going to work backwards on the pedestrian phasing. We are maintaining what's called exclusive pedestrian phasing out there, which means when a pedestrian pushes one of the buttons, they're going to get the walk signal, as well as all the other corners. We get the walk signal at the same time. So there would be no conflict with vehicles, excuse me. Furthermore, that's why we're still prohibiting the right turns on red from the side street, because that's the one concern when you have exclusive pedestrian phasing, is that right turn hook movement is now you're allowing pedestrians to cross. They have their own phase, but that right turn hook becomes an issue. So we're restricting that movement as well. It would be on demand, meaning that phase would only be serviced when the button is pushed. The reason that's important is obviously if we're stopping traffic in all directions every cycle, traffic's going to get backed up for quite some distance. So signal head visibility, yeah, especially on east-west corridors, it's always a challenge. There's not a great solution. The one thing I will say is the newer LEDs, the more modern LEDs are much more vibrant. They're much more visible in all times of the day. But without a doubt, if you're staring straight at the sun, there's not a lot. It doesn't matter how bright they are. Backplates do help that a little bit. A lot of the signal heads out here, you can only see the indication. The backplate kind of provides a shadowing effect. There are also visors that are going to be provided that provides a shadow over the indication as well. Again, if someone's staring at the sun and they're blind to the sun, that is difficult, but there are some countermeasures we try to keep in place, so your concerns are certainly warranted.
Are there any more committee questions? Okay, all right.
I
thank you
owe
very much.
Eric a response, though.
Oh.
You asked me a question on the existing level of service, and I can get back to
Yeah.
you. So 2032 build, just looking at the PM and Saturday, for all intensive purposes, the overall level of service was actually better when compared to alternative one. The reason for that is all movements were functioning better except for the southbound left turn lane. That was a failing level of service. So alternative one, due to that advanced phase that we're providing, is improving that level of service, but it's kind of at the expense of the other approaches. Alternatives 2 and 3 tend to function a little bit better than existing conditions, especially where you have dedicated left turn lanes. So sorry for the delay, but good question.
Great, thank you for the presentation, and with that, we'll move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. And given the amount of time the meeting's run over, if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, that would be ideal. Just come up to the podium and speak to any of the issues on the agenda. All right, with that, I'll close the public comment, and we're moving on to old business. A, Middle Street, Miller Avenue, Summer Street intersection, which we just talked about. Request for selection of preferred alternative for construction by DPW. Sample motion would be moved to select the hybrid option for the reconstruction of the intersection, and the hybrid option was the third option, if I have my facts correct.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, I'd move to accept that for discussion purposes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who would like to kick off the discussion?
Well, it just looks at, as a committee, there's more, based on the public input, there's more conversation that has to be happened, for more input from the public, more thought being put in for the staff and the engineers, till we finally come up with 1, 2, or 3, or a hybrid of 1, 2, or 3. That's just for conversation purposes, for discussion.
So, Mr. Chairman, for me?
Yes.
I think if there was not a parking impact, I think it would be clear that alternative 3 would be the preferred alternative. It provides the best function, I believe, and it minimizes the impacts to parking. However, there is still a parking impact, and that is a concern. If there are ways to mitigate that, to reduce that impact, I think that would be worthwhile exploring. But, at this point, I'm not sure if that's possible.
Question based on timelines. If we were to not vote on this tonight, if we were to take another look at it, would that delay the project, or is the project far enough in the future that we have time to consider more
We're
options?
thinking of a spring bid, so
Possibly do some construction for next winter, put up the signal equipment during the winter next year.
So there is some time. I would like to make a clear timeline of decision, that, we could take into consideration the comments that have been made and come back at the next Parking, Traffic, and Safety meeting in January, and take this up again. However, this intersection is in desperate need of upgrade, and it's been a long time coming, and we need to address this, so.
I walk this intersection about 3 times a day, so I couldn't agree more. It sounds like we're probably going to end up postponing this to the January meeting. Are there any thoughts the committee would like to discuss before we'd make a motion to postpone, regards to the options they would prefer or comments on parking?
I might make a couple if you
Erica.
can tolerate them.
It's better to do it now and then
Yeah,
we can
I
take
think
it into
so.
account.
I guess in the interest of trying to simplify things, personally, I think option 2 is far too much pavement for this location where we have really significant pedestrian activity and it's really proximate to our downtown. I don't want to kick it out, but I think it makes our lives easier to have a simpler thing. So I would be in favor of removing option 2 from our choice set. That's my preference. I don't want to speak for everyone else on the committee. So from my perspective, dropping between 1 and 3, this is a pedestrian heavy environment, and Middle Street is Middle Road. Oh my gosh, am I getting it wrong?
Middle Street.
It is Middle Street, right? This is a location where we've had a ton of concern about speeding. And I feel like while option 3 does make things work better from a operations perspective, it facilitates faster speeds, and that runs counter to, we spent a whole year trying to work on reducing speeds, including on that road. And especially if that median is just striped, that's just a whole lot of open pavement. There's nothing there that constrains the road and slows traffic down. I recognize that the delay in level of service that we see with option 1 shows some movements, and the overall delay and level of service are level of service E. But those are using some pretty conservative assumptions. I know those are things like 1% growth is something New Hampshire DOT likes to see as their floor, but that's a lot of growth to assume. And so to say that, I mean, those are just barely level of service E. It's not like we're like failing off the charts in, exponential growth failing. We're kind of on the cusp of level of service E using very aggressive or conservative assumptions. 1% growth for 10 years is a lot of growth. And from my perspective, we're just barely in level of service E using all that growth. I could go further, but I feel like alternative 1 performs adequately for a downtown environment. It is right on the border of our real downtown area. It's an area we've been trying to slow speeds. It has a lot of pedestrians, and I think it does what it needs to do for that environment. And it's okay to have slightly longer delays in an urban environment. So that's my opinion, which
I
is
think it's
not
helpful
subtle. Sorry.
feedback. Is there any other committee comments or
I'd be willing to
questions?
withdraw my motion.
So we've rescinded the motion. I'd look for a motion to postpone this agenda item until the January meeting.
Mr. Chair, if we could add to that, that we remove option 2 from that, and that we just look at more in depth on 1 and 2.
1 and 3.
1 and 3, yes, thank you.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item B under old business, Woodbury Avenue, request to approve revised speed cushion design plan by DPW. Sample motion, move to approve revised speed cushion plan for Woodbury Avenue with 6 speed cushions. And somebody would want to make that motion, second it?
I'll move that for discussion purposes, and I believe, Eric, did you have something you wanted to speak to that?
We just need a second too.
Okay.
I'll second.
Yes, I do have a plan in the packet. We had our public meeting at the New Franklin School where we presented the findings of the trial results from this past summer. And the results showed that there was substantial benefit, a reduction in speed on Woodbury Ave from having the speed cushions in place. And it was, the volume of the number of vehicles going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit was drastically reduced, and the average speeds were reduced about 10 miles per hour. So the speeds that were observed with the cushions in place were, right in line with the posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour. The feedback that we received at the meeting earlier this month was that the overall number of the 8 speed cushions was just a little bit too much, and they would like to see fewer, the residents in the area. So we have a revised plan in the packet, and it's on, I could bring it up here as well. Hard to see on the screen, obviously, but we've reduced the number of speed cushions from 8 down to 6. And this allows us to still have each speed cushion with a 500-foot spacing. 500-foot spacing is key because that keeps the traffic down to 25 miles per hour. Once you increase that spacing of the cushions beyond 500 feet, you're going to pick up speed between the cushions. Probably you're going to get up, closer to 30 miles an hour again. It was really a desire to keep that speed limits at 25 is why we're keeping the number of cushions at 6. So we've reduced it from 8 to 6. We took one of the speed cushions out that was in the summertime in this area between Echo Echo Ave and Maplewood Ave, so there's just one cushion there instead of two. And then going down the corridor, I think there was another one in this area between Farm Lane and Rockingham. We reduced that by one. So there's 6 still proposed, down from 8 originally.
Thank you, and I'll open it up to the committee for questions. Mark?
Well, I just got a question for Eric. Eric, are those cushions going to be permanent, or are they going to be put in for seasonal?
No, they would be permanent. When the road gets reconstructed and repaved, they would also be formed as part of that road work.
Okay.
So they would be asphalt, not rubber, and they would be permanent year-round. And they would have less of a noise difference because of the same material. There wouldn't be a lip on them where cars are going to hit them abruptly. It would be more smooth transition.
Okay, we're not making decisions, we're not making a vote here for discussion only. What I've heard back in the summertime, I got phone calls, and I'll say it again, I got phone calls from 2 residents on Woodbury Avenue. I spoke to Eric tonight before the meeting. I just went dead on my mic. That's all right. We don't need it.
No, you need the mic for
recording.
Okay. So I asked Eric how many vehicles drive down Woodbury Ave a day. That number, based on what he told me tonight, was between 7,000 and 10,000. The issue that 2 residents had this summer is that speed tables, speed bumps, speed cushions caused a backup of traffic, so they couldn't get in and out of their driveway. The other concern is when you have emergency vehicles, whether it's fire, police, especially an ambulance, that's going to impede their response time. Now, if you live on Woodbury Avenue, that could be a concern. Or you can look at it this way, that how many vehicles per year, historically, emergency vehicles go down that street. So I just wanted to bring up 2 topics, one from a resident and one based on emergency vehicles.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mark, just a quick point of clarification. We are intending to vote tonight on this design. We've met 4 or 5 times on this topic.
Okay.
And we've received pretty clear feedback that speed cushions are the preferred consensus in terms of how to deal with this. We had alternative approaches. They were not received well. And it came down to the number of speed cushions versus whether we're going to have them or not.
Yeah, and I guess just to give a little bit of history to Director Rice's point, we did, as a city and a committee, we initially proposed islands instead of cushions. Those were generally not well received because the effect on speed on that road would not be as substantial as it is with speed cushions. So why I agree that there is certainly not consensus that speed cushions are ideal. Places such as Aldrich that have them, in Maplewood, there's mixed reviews, but the fact is they do tend to slow traffic down effectively compared to other methods.
Okay. Well, if we are voting tonight, that I can publicly say that I'm going to vote against it. And the number one reason, or the 1 and 2, is exactly what I just said, that the public on Woodbury Avenue, the people that live there, pay taxes, and are concerned that they're not going to be able to get in and out of their driveway if you have 7,000 to 10,000 cars going down there a day, and you have 1 or 2 or even 10 or 6 speed cushions. And number 2 is very important when you deal with emergency vehicles, whether it's fire, police, in particular ambulances, that the whole idea is to get from point A to B as soon as possible in a safe manner for the personnel. So I can't vote in favor of this tonight. I'll have to say no. That's just my opinion.
One point of clarity,
yes.
We're just recommending. This isn't, the council ultimately
Right.
has to accept this.
Yeah, I understand
So
that.
there's another-
I understand that, and I think the public should know that. We're a recommendation committee. We're not a decision-making committee. So I understand that. It's just important for the public to understand that. So my recommendation is no on this. What the city council does with it is totally up to them.
Thank you. Is there, Dave and then Steve?
I went to the public meeting on this, and what I heard was, in general, the consensus was that people were in favor of the speed cushions. There was some talk about the backup, but it seemed to me when I drove that is it was unfamiliarity that really caused that. And I think as they're in and used, people will become used to them, and there'll be less of the actual full stop before they come to them, which they did with the temporary speed bumps. The other issue was the noise associated with those, and I think Eric explained that those temporary ones were higher and had a steeper slope than what would be the permanent ones, and that I guess people, you know, with the maintenance trailers and whatnot going over, there was often loud clanging when they would go over that, and apparently that the permanent installation has a more gradual slope, and that noise would be reduced from the temporary ones that were put up. So those were the two issues that I heard, and I think I personally would vote to go forward with it.
Thank you, Dave. Steve?
I just want to say that we spent a lot of time speaking about this, and I want to thank the staff for facilitating what I think which one of the most well-attended and thorough meetings that we've had on any topic. And although it's not a pure consensus, there is a wide variety of opinions, and maybe not my personal preference, I do believe what's being presented is a median consensus of what was spoken to at that meeting.
Any further discussion? And I'll just add, not specific to this project, but generally speaking, when things come before PTS, it's because people want traffic to slow down in their neighborhood. Whenever we implement traffic calming measures that are effective and slow people down, people that are passing through that don't want to be slowed down are generally upset with those measures. So typically, whatever we approve in PTS maybe not be as satisfactory as people would like, because the people that want traffic to slow down feel like maybe it didn't slow down enough, and the people that were slowed down feel like they've been slowed down too much. So I do think, you know, I thank everybody on this committee, because most of the decisions that we have to make are generally not very popular. But with that, I'll call for a vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Fire Chief?
Yeah, again, I've said it before at these meetings, and I'll say it again here tonight. The fire department is opposed to these going on the streets in the city.
Police Chief?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As far as from a police department perspective, I will be voting yes tonight, but with some reservations. And I will be voting yes mostly because of the reduction in the actual speeds and what the data shows. However, I do believe the same as Chief McQuillan with respect to when police officers and firefighters are trying to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. The fewer things that are in the way is preferred. I did ask for feedback from officers with these when they were temporarily in place. I didn't hear a ton of negative feedback, and for that reason, I will be voting yes. And that is primarily because the years and years and years of people on Woodbury Ave asking for us to do something, and two, the effectiveness of these speed cushions in the data, and that it significantly slowed cars. However, I would just say that we are cautious moving forward, keeping the public safety aspect in mind, that these don't be used when not necessary throughout the city, because eventually it will become an issue for the police as well. That's all.
Thank you, Chief. With that, could I have a roll? Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
I don't want to have to repeat my comment. Train of thought. I'm just listened to the chief, and I listened to Captain Maloney. I'm still going to say no, because I received two people that don't even live next to each other on Woodbury Avenue that had a strong opinion on this. That they went to the first meeting at New Franklin School. They weren't comfortable with the tone at the meeting, so they never went to any after that. And so I think that when we get into this word consensus, based on a meeting at New Franklin School, I'm not sold on it. I am sold on the fact that people have the right to enter and exit their properties. I also am sensitive to the to the fire and police department in the sense of response time. And that's because of my 20 years of service given to the Newcastle Fire Department. Response time is important. When you put obstacles and barriers in the street, it decreases that time. That's not only my opinion, but it's a general opinion of the emergency response environment community. That's it.
Yeah, and I think that point is well taken. What we're trying to balance always is, response time is critical, but not having to respond because there's not an incident can't be discounted either. And it's calculus. It's not easy, straightforward math. But with that, I would take a roll call vote, please.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
No.
Erica Wygonick,
Yes.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McMillan,
No.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
Stephanie Casella, Planning Department,
Yes.
Dave Allen,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Erica, do we?
Did I skip Erica? I voted.
Oh, all right, sorry. Yes. Okay. Informational items. Bartlett Street project update.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Also at the earlier meeting at the New Franklin School this month, we discussed the findings of the mini roundabout at the Bartlett-Thornton intersection, and it was decided to remove that option as an alternative for design. So the project will be going forward with final design on two alternatives. One is the four-way stop, which is currently in place, and the second alternative will be a raised intersection, similar to the existing raised intersections on Maplewood Avenue. And that project we will be putting out to bid. I don't know, Dave, if you might have a better handle on that, but it's going out to bid in about 40 days, and with construction scheduled to start next year.
Assuming we get a good bidder, we'll be starting construction in the spring.
Starting construction in the spring, assuming a good bid.
And just a question, so we're gonna have two alternatives. Is this committee gonna pick between the two, or is the city gonna pick between the two?
Yeah, it would go out to bid. We'd see how the bids come back on the two alternatives, and then a decision would be made. I believe that's.
We'll bring it before the committee.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. And then B, monthly accident report from police.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the month of October, we had 80 total motor vehicle crashes. 44 of those were reportable. Bear with me. We had no accidents involving bicyclists and no accidents involving pedestrians. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd just take a minute to just quickly talk about the fact that with Thanksgiving last week, the holiday season is upon us, and that means plenty of opportunities for us to get together with family and friends and celebrate. And we always ask that we please do so safely. Unfortunately, we've seen a number of serious accidents in the city over the last year or so, including fatalities. Some of them involved alcohol, and this is preventable. The Portsmouth Police Department will be out aggressively enforcing DWI laws as we were over the Thanksgiving holiday. We conducted, just in that 5-day period leading up to Thanksgiving and beyond, we conducted 235 motor vehicle stops, which resulted in 5 DWIs just in the couple of days in and around Thanksgiving. So those 5 DWIs are what we're looking for. We hope we don't find them, but that increased enforcement is certainly going to be out there in the next month. But we ask for voluntary compliance before any enforcement action needs to be taken. So that's just a reminder for everybody to please drive safe around the holidays.
Thank you, Chief. And I think that, it's great to hear the increased enforcement. And moving on, C, revised parking principles update.
I can bring Parking Director Ben Fletcher will address it.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to give an update here. As you all know, the division is engaged with Desmond Design Management for a 10-year assessment of the parking division's operations. We recently held a public meeting on 11/15 regarding the parking principles from 2012, P2012. They've served us very well for the last 10 years. We're also working with an advisory group consisting of volunteers from the business community with stake in an execution of an holistic parking approach and transportation approach for the city. They helped us evaluate P2012 and update the language from 21 bullet points down to 16, but with no major changes to the approach. So P2023 will go to PTS in January with a discussion opportunity, and of course with the idea that the committee would recommend the updates to council for approval.
All right, thank you, Director Fletcher. And is there any miscellaneous items? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Good night, Portsmouth.